say that we are here today to examine the conditions, the interactive phenomena, the treatment modalities, and other influences as it impacts the life, the growth, and development of our children. Our focus is the child. We are encouraged to support our children who function at an optimal level. In addition, we are asked to strengthen the necessary phenomena necessary to help our children who are not functioning at an optimal level. We feel that the characterization intrinsically used to define and describe the state of our children can be changed. Therefore, this conference is to provide all of us with that challenge. And we do know that it is a challenge. I need not stand here and go through a whole litany of things or conditions that is happening to our children. We know that the challenge is extremely great. But what is more important is that we know we can make a difference. We just have to use our collective will, our collective power, and the various technologies and other things to improve conditions for our children, thereby strengthening families, etc., etc., etc. So that this morning's session, we will start with some welcoming remarks. The first on your printout will be Dr. Theodor Jameson, who is the president and CEO of Interfaith Medical Center. He needs not only our support and cooperation for the medical center, but we need him as well. Dr. Jameson.
Thank you, Dr. Shabazz. To the leadership of the Black Family Foundation, to our elected and appointed officials, to the members of the various service agencies represented here today, to the interfaith staff assembled, greetings. Interfaith Medical Center is pleased to welcome you to this, the second Black Family Conference. Interfaith views its role here at the conference not as a privilege but as an obligation. In servicing the residents of Central Brooklyn, Interfaith must be an advocate for affordable housing, an economic stimulant to the community, an advocate and a protagonist for social reforms, an advocate for upgrading of our institutions of learning, and an education, training, and resource center for our community. The theme of this conference, Foster Care, Children in Crises. If the plight of our children is not addressed and effectively addressed soon, the flip side of this theme could very well read, Black society failed, survival in jeopardy. Our children, God's greatest gift and resource to us, are under siege. Children are to be loved, protected, and nurtured, not battered, bruised, neglected, abandoned, and murdered. At Interfaith, through social services, we provide immediate intervention for protection, placement, and other human services. We care for the highest concentration of neonatal babies in Brooklyn, many whose very existence has been compromised, even at the moment of conception, by drugs and sexually transmitted diseases such as AIDS. These same little babies and other youths are later guided by our early childhood center, our early childhood direction center. The hundreds of teen mothers-to-be not only receive first-rate medical care, but along with the fathers-to-be, receive training in parenting skills. Is this enough? No. Interfaith is fortunate to have a cadre of health professionals who give liberally of their time and talent outside of the healthcare industry and that healthcare industry institution to the community. Is this enough? No. Assemblyman Vann, who's on the dais today, a father, an educator, a legislator, a man deeply entrenched in his community, is chairman of the New York State Assembly Committee on Children and Families. He cares. He is doing. Is this enough? No. Interfaith is grateful for the germination and development of the Black Family Foundation and for the leadership of Dr. Randy Tobias, Dr. Betty Shabazz, and others. We are continuously fortified by the support and commitment of our lawmakers, Assemblyman Vann, Senator Velmanette Montgomery, Councilwoman Mary Pinkett, and all who are leaders within our city, state, and county and federal government. We appreciate the efforts in behalf of this community. The scriptures read at one point, "Open your mouth for the speechless, and in the cause of all who are appointed to die, open your mouth and plead the cause of the poor and needy." Is this enough? No. But it's a beginning. Our children are under siege. This conference and the leadership of this community must declare a state of emergency and wage war against the destruction of our young. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jameson. Next person who will welcome you is Dr. Leo Corby. Dr. Leo Corby comes to Medgar Evers College from our central office, and he was a vice chancellor. He supported the original concept when the Black Family Foundation was first conceived. From his seat at central office, he now is the acting president of Medgar Evers College. Yesterday, talking to him when we were talking about what would happen here, that we were dealing with children, he stated that we have to look at the life process. And although there were a number of people who were working on behalf of children at the beginning of that process, that he supported that, but his expertise is usually not at the end of that process, but somewhere before you get to the middle. He deals, or we could say that his contribution intersects the child in crisis at a late stage, where here at the college and even at central office, he was concerned that young people had and have the opportunity to go to college, to improve the quality of their lives. He dealt with making sure that they had financial aid, academic counseling. He supports the Women's Center here that support women with children, single parents, auditorium. How do you like it? This is new for us. He was very concerned. You can see that they are still working on it, right? But he was very concerned that you would be comfortable here today. And as you can see, the stage is not completed. We don't have paint. It means a double job because they now got to come and clean it and then stain it, right? But he wanted you to be comfortable here. And so that let me bring the acting president of Medgar Evers College, who was concerned about your comfort here today, to the mic to just simply welcome you here. Dr. Leo Corby.
I'm smiling because Dr. Tobias just gave my remarks for me. Thank you very much, Doctor. Dance guests, conference participants, it's indeed a pleasure to welcome you to Medgar Evers College. And Dr. Tobias is correct. This is actually the second affair we've had in this auditorium. It's brand new. The first one was last night. It's fitting, of course, that it was a freshman orientation program. And our students had an opportunity to sit in these seats. Usually our affairs are held in the gymnasium with the movable seats. So we're very proud of this building. And I guess my first remark should be an apology because obviously we're not finished. The floors aren't buffed and it's not ship-shaped. We hope that the next time we do come, it will be. We take tremendous pride in this building. It's fitting that this conference should be here about the child in crisis, families in crisis, because that's what Medgar Evers College is all about. I hope that your day is productive, and I hope that this is not the last time that you will be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Corby. Our next person who will come to welcome you is a young man that many of you know. I know some of our professors here have worked with him at LIU and several other colleges. He is Dr. Randy Tobias. He is a professor in the School of Administration and Supervision at Queens College, a sister college to Medgar Evers. And additionally, he is the president of the Black Family Foundation, the organization that is sponsoring this workshop today. Dr. Tobias has published and graduated with honors from about 4 colleges, and I guess he's tired now, but anyway. Dr. Tobias, please come and welcome your guest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shabazz. Just want to offer my heartfelt welcome to all of the participating agencies, today's guests. The Black Family Foundation started in the spring of 1987 out of a dream. In 87, right here at Medgar Evers College, the old facility, we had a 3-day conference on the crisis of the black family, and we said that we didn't want this conference just to be a conference where people presented papers and their views and went home. But what we wanted to do was to create a follow-up. And so what you have is the Black Family Foundation Incorporated is a follow-up to the Black Family Conference, and we report back to the community at least once a year to tell the community about our progress. Now, who is this Black Family Foundation? Basically, there are 9 of us who work together. We form a board of directors, and we meet once a month, hosted by Interfaith Medical Center. And I'd just like to introduce the members. Some of us are not here, we are doing other things, but we do have a core group here, and I'd like to introduce the members with your patience and indulgence. First, I'd like to introduce the core of the Black Family Foundation that's responsible for this particular conference on foster care. All right? Luella Dudley, would you please stand? Luella Dudley, Dr. Betty Shabazz, of course. black family, the education, economic development, housing, black families in the political arena, you name it. We are trying to address those issues. So continue to support us and pray with us that we can carry out these duties and responsibilities. Again, welcome and thank you for coming. Okay, I have been remiss, and thank you, Dr. Shabazz, for bringing this to my attention. There's one person, again, that I did not mention, and he is the trustee of the Black Family Foundation, serves on the board of directors, and kind of the grandfather, and I don't want him to yell at me for using this phrase because he is a young man, but this person is the grandfather of organizations in this community, and I'd like to introduce the trustee of the Black Family Foundation, Mr. Charles Joshua, who serves as president of the Central Brooklyn Coordination. And again, I apologize, Mr. Joshua, for that omission. Thank you again.
Let's give the president of the Black Family Foundation another hand. And we have to support young people who attempt to take the bull by the horn, as we oftentimes say, and attempt to make a difference. Because we know that they could be out doing other things, could they not? Could they not? So that we are very appreciative, Dr. Tobias, of what you are attempting to do. And I use the word attempting to do because the job is really mammoth. Now we will have some opening remarks. And the first person would be the Honorable Velmanette Montgomery. Let me just say that this young woman is a wife, a mother, and a politician. And she serves the 22nd Senatorial District. Please put your hands together and welcome her. The Honorable Velmanette Montgomery.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Shabazz, and also to Luella. Both of them have talked to me for a few weeks about this conference. So I know how hard they've worked to put it together, and I'm very pleased that they decided to exert the kind of energy that they have to discuss a very important issue for all of us. And to Mr. Jameson, who is the president of Interfaith. I get the titles CEO, president. He's a very important person to us here. Provides health care, is the major, Interfaith is the major health institution in our community, and it's also a major employer of people in our community in Bed-Stuy, Northern Brooklyn. And so his presence here is very important. He is very important because that institution is so significant for many reasons. And Dr. Corey, who is also acting president for the moment of the only black institution up north, Medgar Evers, also a very important person. And my colleague, Assemblyman Vann, who is extremely important because he is the chair of the Children and Families Committee, the Standing Committee of the Assembly in the state of New York. And in that capacity has a lot of power and wields a lot of influence. And so this is a very important gathering of important people. Though those seats out there are not filled, I can tell you that it's very strategic that we're here together talking to each other. And I look out in the audience and I see Willie Wren, who has become sort of a pioneer, has been a pioneer because he's done organizing to sponsor very important programs, daycare, senior programs, in-home care services, and now has a foster care program agency. And I think his program was one of the first after many years of struggling to get, and I remember before I went to the legislature, and I remember going to hearings when Vann was grilling the commissioner at that time of social services about the fact that the way the monies came into communities that we could not access it. And so that's been a long fight, many years of struggle, and now we have a black foster care agency right here in Brooklyn. And so I'm very happy to see you here, and I believe Mr. Joshua is the other one. That's the other agency. So these are very significant pieces to our puzzle, trying to really string together a support system for our own young people. I just want to share a couple of things with you. I've been thinking a lot about this whole business of poverty and being poor and homelessness and what it's all about. And I was at a meeting a couple of months ago, and there's a woman who is now the deputy commissioner, I believe, of the Office of Mental Health, Gloria Logston, who is a very sensitive woman who has been down here in the community and who has grown up, with similar experiences to all of us in the room. And she was talking, made me think about myself and a lot of people that I know. And she said that when she grew up, she was poor. She wasn't without shoes and without food, but she was poor. And so was I, and I remember. And but the one thing that her parents could tell her and could give her hope for was that if she just got her education, she would not have to remain that way forever. It wasn't a station in life forever. And as I look at that, look at people that I know, a lot of people who now are professionals of all sorts, have grown up in the projects. They didn't start out with, a silver spoon. Most black middle class people are, in fact, first generation middle class, and are now able to send their children to Yale and Harvard and what have you, and not receive and not be eligible for any assistance because they earn enough money on their own. And certainly that's what happened with me. I went to school on a student loan and with student aid and what have you. And so at one point, at least in the history of our being in this country, we had a way out. And I don't ever remember anybody referring to me as being disadvantaged or, to tell you the truth, being poverty-stricken. And so it's really a different world for poor people because as I look around at kids growing up in the hotel down the street from my office and other shelters and kids who end up using the emergency room for their primary health care and what have you, that there's almost no way out, so that the system has become so corrupt that it doesn't fulfill the mission of helping people to move from point A to point B as a station in life. And that's a big disappointment, and it's a big problem. And I hope that that's what we're going to be talking about today, that we've got to really attack this problem of not so much being poor, because hopefully you can change that, but that the system in and of itself, the education system with the kind of racism and the kind of insensitivity and whatever all the problems are, and the healthcare system and the problems related to housing and the way we deal with real estate and the way we look at poor people and whether or not they should be eligible or we should have housing available to them. All of those different systems that have really turned away from a sense of mission to help people and make life better and bring people through, as opposed to holding them in and keeping them back. It calls for a kind of reform that goes, I think, beyond sprinkling a little more money on what we have. And it really speaks to, I think, people like Willie Wren to say, you're going to do what other people have been doing, but you're going to do it differently, and you're going to do it better because you have a unique capacity to identify a different way with the experiences, and you also hopefully have a different kind of mission, not to hold not to hold people in, but to let them out, let them fly. So I hope we come away with some new ideas and thoughts about how we can move. Vann needs direction. I need direction. All of us need direction. Welfare reform is here. What the state does with it is very important. Hopefully you're going to talk about that today and how that's going to impact on the kids that we are talking about, the families that we're talking about, and those kinds of things. So I thank you for coming together, and I am prepared to continue to work with all of you. And if I don't know you, if you're doing something, please identify yourself to me, because I would like to know and to be able to support in whatever way I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Velmanette Montgomery. Let me just say that most of you that are here are agency people, people that provide hands-on experience with children and or families. And some of you are direct decision makers. It is extremely important that we understand that we can no longer criticize, quote, the system, that each one of us is responsible and can be responsible. Let me just say that I was in the, outside of the auditorium, and a white male came up and greeted Miss Dudley. And so she introduced him to me. And he said, "Hi, my name is," and it just went, I'll remember it later. Right. But he said, "I grew up in a foster home, and I was defined as retarded until I was 17 years old, when all of the agency money ran out." And I thought, how many of our children get lost in the system? And here we have a white male who got lost. He's an engineer now, make lots of money, ladies.
But I'm married.
He makes lots of money and can support his family. He is one of those second generations that the senator just mentioned. Now, if he is white male and in our society, you can just imagine what happens to some of our other youngsters. And you know that as agency people, you really need to be able to make a difference. And all of us can in our own way. And speaking of a person that makes a difference, Mary Pinkett. The Honorable Mary Pinkett. I happen to have shared a day with her in a church. It was an award ceremony. She received an award. And I did not know until the program, as the program really got underway, that number one, all of the old sisters and brothers in that church knew her from a child. She grew up there. They felt that they had made a contribution to her development, that she has grown up in Brooklyn, and she has made her contribution here. I, at this point, would like to welcome to the podium for opening remarks the Honorable Mary Pinkett, the 28th, who represents the 28th Councilman District.
Thank you. To Mr. Jameson, who is one of the CEO, I'm sure everybody has CEO, which is the Chief Executive Officer, and to, of course, the president of this important Black Family Foundation, and to Mr. Joshua, who is the young grandfather, to my colleagues in government, Assemblyman Vann, Senator Montgomery, and to all of the dais guests whose names I may not know, and to you who are agency executives and leaders in our community, let me just say this. was the same. We knew that our families soaked the beans so that we would have the dinner. We all knew that we had to go to Sunday school, or you couldn't go any place. We all had to go to church. We all had standards set for us. And I refuse to believe that progress did not begin until 1980. I refuse to believe that. We are standing in Medgar Evers College because black people believed that they had a right to have a black college in this community. And they didn't wait till 1980 to decide that. I happen to know that the only reason there's an interfaith hospital is because predominantly a staff, not just PhDs, not just MDs, but people decided that they were not going to give up their jobs, they were not going to give up their hospital, and they were going to fight for it. And they fought and they won. So I happen to believe that with every group of people, there is a wellspring of courage. Now, maybe I'm wrong. If so, Sojourner Truth never lived. If so, Frederick Douglass was a liar. If so, there was never a man like Denmark Vesey. And I happen not to believe that. I happen to believe that there are poor whites who get trapped in a system. And the interesting thing about this system is they like us to believe that the only poor people are poor black people. And they like to divide us and keep us separated. And we ought to stop that nonsense. We ought to reach out and find poor people, no matter who they are, where they are, and say there's a commonality of interest. The other thing that we cannot forget, and I give you credit for what you're doing, I think what the Black Family Foundation is doing is so important. Because if you do not succeed, we do not survive as a people. Because if we do not save our children, we can forget it. We can talk middle class, we can talk upper class, we can talk CEO. But if you have no extension of yourself in the future, it doesn't make any difference at all. It doesn't make any difference at all. And while we're talking about who we are and where we are, we must remember there was a group, if you're in social services, called the Black Social Workers. And they started the revolution before. They said, we must have something to say about the future of black children. And so some of these sparks that you are carrying came from people who carried this fire beforehand. Some of you who are leaders came just as I did, through a church situation. I went to a service at Concord on, I believe it was Wednesday. And as I looked at the progression of the people and see the work that they're doing in that community, it isn't coming from outside. It isn't coming from the state telling them what to do. It isn't coming from the city telling them what to do. It's coming from a people who are committed to a life of their own and the community. And they're determined that they shall not die. So I guess I am one of those foolish optimists. I believe in me. Now, who is me? Me happens to be everyone in this room who happens to be like me, and that includes you, brother engineer. Brother engineer, social worker, okay? That includes everyone like you. So it means that as far as I'm concerned, the problems of foster care that we have to deal with is a social service agency who would define all of us in a certain mode. A media who would project all of us in a certain manner. Who do not believe that we know how to save our own children, to talk to children. Who think they have all the answers, and who would prescribe for us what indeed life should be like for all of us within our community. In so doing, they destroy us because they wash away from us our own strength, our own ability to recall and to remember who we are and what we are, our ability to reach within ourselves for our own strength, to believe that we can build as we have always built. Last November, I was in the pyramids, bending and climbing. And you know what? I know that we built those pyramids. If we built the pyramids, if we traded when nobody else was trading, if indeed we were performing surgery when people did not believe in surgery, if we had libraries when nobody else had libraries, if indeed we could conquer the world and if we could teach the world, why indeed can we not heal ourselves by believing in ourselves? I believe that we can. I unfortunately must leave this conference, and I don't really want to leave. I'd like to stay. But I had a good friend and a volunteer who worked with me, who was killed, unfortunately, in an accident. She was hit by the most unlikely, a motorcycle, and I must attend those services. So I must depart, but I want you to know, I expect to hear what has transpired here. I expect to be a part of what you do. Doesn't matter that my committee is not youth. My commitment is to the cause of saving our people and ourselves, and remembering that this country will not be a country unless we're part of it. And there is no future without us. And our future is in saving our children. Thank you.
You will have to excuse me, I did skip over, but I guess I'll save some of the best for the last, not all of the best for the last. Our next speaker who will welcome us will be the Honorable Albert Vann, who represents the 656 Assembly District here in Brooklyn. Let me just say that Assemblyman Vann has always been a leader. I met him about 25 years ago. Was that about that? He was young, leaner than he is now, and full of the spirit and fire to save the world. He was in charge. I don't know if many of you remember when he was in charge of a group of teachers. And he was telling them that you have to motivate and inspire your children that you teach. You must use your own analysis and evaluation to define the application. He has always been a leader, working with and through people to improve the quality of their lives. And I really have seen him mature and grow. And I wonder sometimes, since he's been out there fighting for so long to try to convince so many people of what to do, how he feels now that some of the very things that he initiated early on in his young life are beginning to catch on, and some of them have died out. My brothers and sisters, let me bring to the podium this young man who has been a leader for so long, the Assemblyman Albert Vann from the 56 AD.
Thank you, Dr. Shabazz, for that very generous introduction to our very special day's guest, very special audience. Wish you all a very pleasant morning. Dr. Shabazz said I've been a leader for a long time. I hope that is so, and if it is so, I've also been a follower for a very long time. a lot of the inspiration that I received and a lot of the direction that I received came from someone who was very close to her, and indeed her husband, because he is one of the people that inspired me, sort of sent me in a certain direction. And I hope that I've been true to that direction, at least I've tried. Billie Holiday used to sing a song, and part of the words were, "The difficult I'll do right now. The impossible will take a little while." Crazy, they call me. Yeah, I'm crazy, crazy love. And I think those words are probably very apropos for us at this stage of the game. Difficult, we have to do right now. Impossible can only take a little while. Because indeed, our children are in crisis. And if our children are in crisis, our families are in crisis. And in very short order, I like to sound a note, maybe a keynote, because I think we have to approach our situation at least from 2 points of view. On the legislative side, Senator Montgomery and myself and many others, we have begun a process of trying to establish a family policy in the state of New York. We would like for New York State to be the first state in the United States to formally adopt a family policy, which I'm not going to get into any real detail here and now. That's about perhaps at another time. It would be appropriate to do that. But to focus on the family in an official way. And all that means, it means a lot. I think what we must be about on a community level, until such time as we have that policy and the coordination of resources to impact supportively on the family, that you have to do the same thing using whatever creativity you have to save as many children as we have. See, the problem is we got all these different approaches dealing with the same child, the same family, and it's very fragmented. And so we have got to find a way, very creatively, to avoid that fragmentation, even though the funding fragments you, the agencies fragment you, and our children are being lost. The fastest growing poverty class in New York State, and indeed the nation, are children and families, most of whom are Black and Hispanic. I mean, the fastest growing class of homeless people in this city and state and nation happens to be children and families, disproportionately Black and Hispanic. So there is a crisis, it's real. And our community is being ravaged by the crises that are affecting our families. The impossible will only take a little while. We have got to build on an inner resolve here. We've got to find ways, we've got to use our minds in a way that we have not used them before, because the answer is not government per se. And I recognize we must use those resources and get them any way that we can. But from my experience, I don't think in the first instance the answer is government. It's the second instance. The first instance has to be us. What we can create on a community level using the institutions and resources that we have here, however failing, however fledgling we are. It is that spirit of cooperation and unity and singleness of purpose that's going to really make the difference. Believe me, when we demonstrate how we can make advances with whatever we have available, then those other things become available. It's like, if you have something, you can always get something. But if you don't have anything and you need it, you can't get anything. So it becomes an attitude. We must adopt an attitude that we are going to deal with our problems. We're not going to let regulations stop us from doing our job, because our families are at stake. We're not going to let criteria prevent us from doing our job, because our children are being lost. And if we accept the urgency of the moment, the urgency of this moment, and thereby incorporate that, internalize that moment, and begin to approach our jobs, our careers, our positions from that frame of reference. Recognize that every one of us need each other up here, institutionally, individually, organizationally. If we do that, if we approach it from that point of view, I am certain that the difficult we'll do right now, but the impossible will only take a little while. Thank you.
We probably need to have a long list of those young people that the Honorable Vann made a difference in their lives. Children who were dropouts and involved with some of the things that is very prevalent in our society today, who have gone on to professional schools and just done marvelous things and made a difference. Some of them in medical school, law school, some are teachers here in Brooklyn, and yet they were thrown out of school, and it was stated that they could not learn, so that we thank you, sir, for those remarks. At this point, we are down to the charge to the various panels. And the person who is going to do that is Dr. Joseph French. Dr. Joseph French is Director of Pediatrics at Interfaith Medical Center. He graduated with honors from Ohio State University a few years ago. He is a certified pediatrician. He is a certified adult neurologist. Additionally, he is a certified child neurologist. He is known primarily for his preventative and treatment modalities in those areas. He has published. He belongs to a number of honor societies. Additionally, he does volunteer work. They say if you want something done, give it to a busy person. My brothers and sisters, let me bring to the mic at this time Dr. Joseph French, who will give you the charge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabazz, for your very flattering introduction. In addition, I would like to thank the Mrs. Dudley for inviting me, to thank the elected and appointed leaders of this community, as well as my peers, for the opportunity to give the charge. It's kind of a tough act to follow, though, in terms of charge. I think Senator Montgomery and Assemblyman Vann, as well as Councilperson Pinkett have done a lot of it already. The sort of basic idea that this thing of being in crisis, though, has not been stated yet, was, to the best of my knowledge, first stated by Pliny the Elder at the commencement of the current era. He lived between 23 and 79 AD. And he pointed out the obvious about man at his time of birth. And the statement was that man is the only one, I guess he was talking about the other mammals, that knows that can learn nothing without being taught. He can neither speak nor walk nor eat, and in short, can do nothing at the prompting of nature only, but weep. There appears, though, now that we know more about development of life systems, that's a corollary of this helplessness at the time of birth. And that is that what goes along with it is a plasticity of behavioral development. And when you're helpless at the time of birth, you have the capacity to have a whole historical heritage, a whole belief system that might be one that commenced like Mose, the first mathematical text found amongst those great pyramids, where we first learn to reckon. All of that can rather efficiently be programmed in you. You don't have to repeat errors of the past. And by the time you're grown up, you can go on and learn more and great things about the future. Maybe even things a la our own particular racial and cultural heritage, like getting a Nobel laureate for peace, in terms of Martin Luther King. I would say that a part of the charge that we have to arrive at here today is how do we, as professionals who serve a community that is disproportionately losing the potential of its youth, learn to be as effective as King was. And at this point, I'd like to make an aside which is very sincere in my own case. When I was off as barely making it family as a child and as a young adult, I didn't worry about my community so much. It was just playing Jackie Robinson here and there, Dr. Shabazz, until my late wife showed me a book that your late husband wrote. And at that time, I had no choice other than to do things like go off to Selma, etc. And I went off because this individual king helped us change our definition of self, to create the proper ideas to be able to effectively sell shoes to snakes and to make it possible for a number of us to effectively swim with sharks. And that has become institutionalized. But as recently pointed out by Wilson out at the University of Chicago, unfortunately, in a statistical sense, even though we can have an individual who is a representative of our ethnicity run the most successful afternoon TV show, and we can have some person as an anchor person on TV, it hasn't trickled down to the vast majority of us. And we have, unfortunately, an excessive number of males who will end up, if they survive until young adulthood, the victims of substance abuse, the distribution of substances that are abused, incarcerated in prisons if they do not drop dead of overdose or commit suicide. They will never, ever, unfortunately, effectively be members of a biological, intact, functioning family unit available to the marriage pool of our people, and effectively pass along a performing concept like kings to individual progeny. Unfortunately, they will disproportionately be instruments of transfer of infectious agents such as HIV, the cause of AIDS, to the progeny born of some of our reproductive females. And without personal choice, these progeny will become a burden to the medical care delivery system, the healthcare delivery system, and emphasize sickness intervention and its ineffectualness, if we talk about cost effectiveness, rather than prevention. In addition, they will be the distribution agents of abused substances to a significant number of these females, who will then bear children who are malformed, either physically, in a morphologic sense, as the fetal alcohol syndrome, or behaviorally, withdrawing from substances such as heroin, cocaine, etc. If the progeny escape this, they will miss the next most important thing of being a human being, because at the time of birth, you are a malleable plastic piece of clay. But you must have this cultural heritage transferred. At a time when individual family units cannot do this, I would ask you as a charge to find some way in which probably our only residual uniqueness as individuals whose progenitors came from West Africa survived the Middle Passage, and you had to be strong as hell to do that, and have at least to the current time proliferated in numbers here and have persisted, is the concept of extended family. And how can we all give when the primary nuclear biological family is a failure? How can we, in this extended sense, be responsible to our progeny, efficiently transfer the concepts that must go on into the next century and the next generation, and hopefully, in a crowded world that now realizes that resources are limited, somehow persuade people to understand, a la what we've just gotten through with in our national executive, that greed is not enough, that the mystery of watching human development and being responsible for your fellow man is our true destiny. And I thank you.
We are certainly thankful to Dr. French for that charge, and the panel, the biological parent and child, are here, I understand, and we will leave the dais, and they, of course, will come up. Let me just say that we have to find ways to intercept or dissect, when necessary, dysfunctioning behavior.
at all cost. And we have to find ways to improve the life process. Let me just give 2 examples of, we might not know, we might not have statistical information to back it up, but we still have to find ways. All of us have empirical information that we can use, that we've seen year in and year out, and we can predict the outcome. All of us can make a contribution to improving the quality of life, and we must have confidence that we can, and we must do just that. We know that all children, all people have something called the pleasure principle. People want to feel good about themselves, they want to feel good, they want to be liked, they don't want to be discriminated against. We know when we treat people the way they should not be treated. And what happens when this is done over and over and over and over and over again? We can change some of that just in ourselves. We can change that. We don't need to go to Harvard and Cambridge and wherever. We know from empirical information that we can change that, so that we impact children's lives, we impact parents' lives, and we do things that we should not do. And we want to, this day, from henceforth, be a change agent and improve the quality of life. The second one is, I often hear people say, what can you tell young people today? You really can't tell them anything, because you know they sell this drugs and they make $500 or $1,500 or $5,000 a day or a week, and they drive these big cars, and you can't tell. How am I going to tell a child you shouldn't do that? You should work after school at the corner supermarket and make $76.83 a week. How am I going to do that? Well, you can do that very easily. Very easily. Because if you make, for instance, $1,000 a week or a day, times 32 weeks, and you are in jail for 15 years, you divide that up by however number of weeks. I'm not a mathematician, Mr. President. I just know how much money you pay me. But you divide that up by the number of weeks or annually, those 15 years. And you end up less than that, $76.83. Plus you can sleep at night. There are young people who cannot sleep at night. You go to a conference and they sleep in their sneakers and their clothing, even their hats. So when a knock comes at 3 a.m. in the morning, because they tell me that's when they raid the places, they can jump out of a window and don't know if they're going to live or not, so that we can make a difference. And you can ride in a limousine today and go to the joint, that's what they tell me they call it, or the caves or the dig or the whatever it is, and be there for the next 15 years telling people how you used to wear your hat backwards and always had $2,000 or $3,000 in your pocket and used to ride down and pick up all the girls or the ladies or whatever you call them. So we must intercept by whatever means we can that kind of behavior. I went to the Brooklyn House of Detention. I really didn't want to go because I had so much on my desk that I had to do. And you know, if you don't stay at your job and look busy and look tired and worried, folks think you're not doing anything. And so, but one of the things that I've started doing, I don't drive there anymore, because then when you get tickets, you know, you have to come and get me. So I went to the house of detention, and the young people were in the chapel, and I had to go through so many doors, and they locked. You know, it does something to you. I mean, hey, God, I hadn't done anything, but I swore I wouldn't do anything. Let me tell you, I went to the chapel on the 11th floor, 10th floor, whatever floor it was, from front to back, and wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder. All of those young men that were there, that looked very much like the people in this audience, they were there, most of them on drug charges. We just cannot let that continue. We must intercept that. And we don't need a PhD to do it. You are the change agent. You can make a difference. Someone said, have you hugged your child today? Or do you tell your children you're doing well, or you look beautiful, or, I mean, do you tell your husband or your wife that? I guess they're still doing that, right? We need to do that. It doesn't take anything from you. Some people just use dysfunctional behavior all the time. They don't even say, that was a good project, because they think if they tell you that you're going to get ahead of them and all that kind of stuff. We've got to make a difference where our families and our children are concerned, and you heard the charge. And I thank you very much for this morning session. Our panels will now start. The participants for the biological parent and child, that workshop is now in session. And we will just leave the dais, and they will come up, and you will have your own, select your own leader. Thank you very much. This panel is the biological parent and child, which examine the availabilities of services, identifies programs that assist in developing effective parenting skills, beneficial in maintaining the child at home, identifies gaps in services and methods to eliminate them. And that is a very important charge, but it might possibly be a difficult charge, because what we know in problem solving is that you don't look at the entire problem all at once, or you might look at the entire problem all at once. But what you try to do is start dissecting and solving and eventually solve the entire problem, because what has happened to a lot of us is that we feel that a problem is too mammoth and we don't have the resources or the help to solve it, so that we leave it. We know that we can make a difference, and whatever part we can play in eliminating that crisis, we must do that. Our first presenter will be Ms. Croft. She's a CSW, and she's the Executive Director of Family Dynamics, and she is a colleague of Mr. Bell. And that's saying a lot. They work together, and they are both dynamic people, and they have made a difference in the lives of a lot of our young people. And I will present her to you at this point. That's right.
And just in thinking about today's conference, thinking about the charge for the workshop on the biological parent and child as it relates to foster care, children in crisis, I was thinking with the panelists here, what should be the focus of my comments? And at first, I was reminded of an observation that was once made, that showing up is 80% of life. So I thought to myself, you've got to concern yourself with the other 20%. But I'd like to do just a little more than show up, today and talk a little about parenting skills and parenting services that are available to families in central Brooklyn. I'm sure that many of the people here in this audience are aware of the facts that over the past 10 years, the numbers of single-parent families have increased in our country, and especially in our community here. We are also very aware of the fact that more and more of our teens are becoming mothers, and are becoming mothers at a much younger age. So how do we intervene? How do we help such family constellations, which are really rather different than perhaps the kind of families that most of us grew up in? There was a concept of family that if you didn't have a mother and a father, there was also the concept of the extended family that's been mentioned here by one of the day's speakers. You could always depend on grandmother or grandfather if father or mother was not in the home. What we're seeing now in our urban communities are families that don't have support. They're single families, they're young teen families, and they don't have the benefit of having the support system of an extended family. That, again, in terms of some of the stresses that are on the young families in our community. And one of the reasons, I think, in addition, of course, with the epidemic of drugs, of increased child abuse and child neglect in the city. What can we do? Well, I think Family Dynamics has a program where they provide parenting education skills to a number of families, some young mothers, both mothers and fathers, in the central Brooklyn community, as well as providing services, parent education skills to parents throughout the city. We have been doing this since 1975, but we still can't reach enough families. And I think some of the things that we try to do in the parent education skills is we try to provide the kind of link that families that are isolated and families that have not had the kind of nurturing that help them to be good parents. We try to do that by educating them around the issues of parenting as it relates to communicating with their children, as it relates to understanding what are the expectations of children at different ages. You should expect something different from a child that's 2 versus a child that's 10 years old. Many of the parents who have children have really no real concept of what it's like to be a parent of a 2-year-old versus what it's like. Many of them expect a 2-year-old to do things that a 10-year-old should do. And those are some of the stresses that bring to bear with the increases that we're seeing in child abuse and child neglect. We also try to provide that link in terms of the extended family concept. We make use of senior citizens, which I think as a resource in our community and a resource in the city is very much underutilized. We don't look to seniors because I think many of us may still have ideas about growing old ourselves, and that once one crosses a certain age barrier that one is kind of useless. But we've found quite the difference with the programs that Family Dynamics has. We found that senior citizens are very productive, very useful, and provide an important resource to young families. Now, our focus today is, of course, on the child, and many times when we're providing services, we try to look at the whole family. But as Dr. Shabazz has mentioned, as part of problem solving, you have to begin to dissect problems, partialize them in such a way that if you can't work and solve all the problems, at least you can see some movement on some of the problems. And one way of doing that, perhaps, if you have a family that's very, very dysfunctional, and you're having difficulty serving the entire family, and it's tough to make such choices, but our bias has always been to try to save the child, try to give the child hope and some sense of future. And if you can do that and save the entire family, good. Sometimes it's very difficult, and with the limited resources around, it's very difficult to have the array of services that can actually treat the myriad of problems that the whole family has. There are very few agencies around that can really treat the whole family without having to refer some of the families down for services to from other agencies that are in the community. Ideally, a good preventive program nowadays would also have the capacity to do drug treatment, because it's just so rampant in our society. And there are very few preventive programs that has that capacity. I mean, I happen to feel that Family Dynamics does provide a comprehensive array of preventive services, such as parent education, crisis nurseries, intensive counseling, support groups, volunteers, senior volunteers to go out and help families in their homes who are overwhelmed, which is very different from having a homemaker, although a homemaker is very important in certain stages of crisis in families. I think that we need, in terms of, not that we have any different ideas about problem solving with our youth and our families today, although I think that we need to look at some of the ways that we are serving families and youth in a different way. I asked my staff, what are some, or what is, as you see it, the barrier for you with serving families today? And almost the majority of them would say to me, housing. Housing and drug addiction are the two #1 problems, and barriers that we as professionals have to find some way to deal with if we want to be effective. And I was asked to focus some of my comments today on what are some of the programs, effective programs, as it relates to parenting skills and as it relates to maintaining the child and the family in the home. I've given an example of Family Dynamics, but there are also other very good programs in the Central Brooklyn community. It's been, I think, Interfaith has been mentioned here already, has a very good comprehensive parent and education program. The Brooklyn Bureau of Community Services, and I'm pleased to say that I just learned that Special Services for Children has just started also a parenting program on Empire Boulevard in this community. So I'm glad to see that it's both the private and the public sector that's involved in this important effort. Children's First is in Bushwick. It's one of the organizations that also provide parent and education services. Crime High Services, Catholic Charities, Monica House, which in itself is somewhat unique because they provide both shelter and support services. Project Bridge focused their attention on teen mothers, and the Sisterhood of Black Single Mothers. Again, a program that's aiming to be a little innovative. The focus their services on those 17 to 21 years of age, and they provide an array of support services, including parenting skills and home management skills. Clearly, parenting education skills as I would see it, should be a part of a continuum in terms of providing effective services to help to maintain families and children in the home. It's an important part. I am a proponent of parent education. As I see it, we require certain competency in almost everything we do, including to get a driver's license in New York City. You have to meet a certain standard in order to get a driver's license in New York City. Whereas we all know that to become a parent, there are no particular standards that one has to meet to become a parent. So I'm a proponent of parent education and think it is an effective tool to help to strengthen families and to give hope to children in the future, because you have parents that can be effective parents and provide good parenting to those children, and those children then will have a chance in the future. What are some of the gaps as we see it, or as I see it, in terms of serving families and children? As I mentioned, housing is clearly a barrier, and the lack of housing, the scarcity of housing is really a problem when we find that we have children that are in foster care, not because they have abused their children or because they have neglected their children. They're in foster care by the simple fact that they were burnt out, and for their own personal reasons, they don't feel that the shelter system is a safe place, and they have voluntarily elected to put their children in foster care, but they're not able to get the children returned to them when you have the 18-month review if there isn't adequate housing in place. So housing clearly is an issue that cuts across all of everything that we try to do in our work with families and children. And it's a basic need. Housing is a basic need. He did not mention it today, but of course Assemblyman Vann has been working at the state level to try to make a difference, and he sees the gap in services as it relates to the foster care system, and trying to bring forth some legislation to help in the area of housing. I think that this is important, and I guess it's important also in terms of what the city is doing as it's moving to build more permanent housing. But I also feel that there is an underutilization of a resource in our community that came to my attention and may be seen as a new idea and perhaps needs a chance to be looked at. And what we have seen in this community is a wealth of senior citizens who live in their homes in brownstones or big apartments that have space, physical space. And is there a way to build a marriage or partnership of some of these seniors who have physical space, has housing, and build some partnership with some young mothers who, for example, have their children in foster care and need housing in order to get the children returned to them? You have, on the side of the senior centers, senior citizens, you have fear. So in terms of overcoming the barrier of fear. But again, I think because of the scarcity of housing in our cities, and because of in my opinion, the underutilization in the area that I see this as a resource, as a possible resource, I think it may be worth looking at in terms of, at least as a pilot, where you would select out very carefully the group of parents that you would bring together in this kind of partnership. It seems to be a way to provide a mutual benefit on the part of the seniors. One senior that I was in the company of recently said to me that, I'm afraid that, I mentioned the idea, I'm afraid that the person may try to kill me or something. I'd rather die alone than to live in that kind of fear. Again, it's something I think as professionals that we need to try and look at different kinds of to implement this, try to look at this and see if we can do this as a pilot, and if it works, whether it's a pilot of 25 or 50 or 100, it may be something that could be replicated, because it seems that there is that resource in this community, in the Central Brooklyn community, and I think perhaps it's a resource that may be available in other parts of the city. And as I see it, not only will it be solving the housing problem, but I think in many ways it also will be looking at the issue of the extended family concept, because many times these young parents are disconnected and isolated, and this is a way to have a surrogate kind of extended family, since they don't have the kind of closeness with their own families. That is one of the things that I think possibly could be done in terms of what could we do. I also believe, and I think it's been mentioned here, about the coordination of services. I think the fragmentation, we're all doing a great job probably in what it is that we do, but I think the cases that we've seen in the news, some of the people that have fallen through the cracks, and maybe some of the reasons why they've fallen through the cracks, is because of kind of fragmentation in our system. Not that you want to create another level of government, but it seems appropriate with all the different things that have been happening and that's been coming to our attention, that there seems to be a need, as Assemblyman Vann indicated about this issue of this Office of Family Policy, and that's, I assume, would be at the state level, but at the city level there seems to be a need for our similar system of Office of Family Policy, or some kind of coordination office that takes the leadership role in coordinating the kinds of services that are being provided in the community and the kinds of services that are being provided by government. It seems unfortunate that the person who needs the help the most, that sometimes we're all involved at different points, but we don't know that we're all involved at different points. And it's important to have someone to take the kind of leadership role to look at that kind of fragmentation. Now, whether that's doable in a city like New York, I really don't know. But I think it's worth taking some look at as to how we can better serve, be more effective in serving families and youth. The other thing that I feel the same as Councilwoman Pinkett, in a sense that I feel that we're all here because we care, and we're all here because we feel that we can make a difference. And I also feel that I am, as she says she is, and that is a foolish optimist, in the sense that I believe that if we intervene with effective services, such as effective parenting services, skills, that we can make a difference, and many of us have made a difference in the lives of families and youth in the Bed-Stuy community. And I like to think that we won't give up that kind of hope, that we will continue to be out there in the forefront, and hopefully to do as Dr. Chavez said, to act as a change system. And I believe that even one person can make a difference. And I think that caring and hoping that the future will be different for the youth of this city, I think it's a primary concern of all of us in this room. And I think that by providing the kind of services to families and youth that we do, and to look for ways to provide them even more effectively, and to look for ways to look at problems, a problem solution, problem solving in different ways, that we can make a difference in the lives of families and youth. Thank you.
much for those inspiring words. Let me just say that one of the things she talked about was making a difference, and that all of us are important and can make a difference. She talked about parenting skills, which indicated support groups, the necessity for support groups. She talked about an extended family. And then she talked about using senior citizens, and which kind of indicated to me that if I didn't have an extended family, maybe in some kind of way, with all of the senior citizens that are lonely and without hope or not feeling important, they could be used. And I think I saw a program like that on television not too long ago, that some of the senior citizens were saying that by having contact with a daycare center, you might have seen the same thing, and how much more important they felt, that they felt useful, and they were teaching, touching and communicating and that sort of thing. I was talking to a young boy who was a Boy Scout who said that he had never been hugged. Isn't that kind of sad? Yeah. Let me just say, for us, maybe we are a little bit tired at this point because we are a little behind and we are going to move forward. But if you could just look at the person next to you and just say, how are you? Right. You want to shake hands? You don't have to hold hands now. Just kind of shake hands. Well, oh my God! I see somebody doing some hugging here. Now I didn't tell you to take it that far. But a lot of us don't want anybody to touch them. And let me just say real briefly, because we have to move on. But I was in group therapy, and I had gone through a crisis and thought maybe I needed some assistance. But when I got in group, I really did get a perspective of where I was as a person. And I discovered that I didn't need that much help, because the people that I was in group with were just so way out on left field that, it gave me some idea. And a lot of us are really sound and walking straight, but we are insecure because we have not compared, ourselves to someone else, and so therefore we feel kind of insecure. So that my thing is that just say you are and act as if you are, and it will kind of ignite it and internalize. And sometimes people say to me, Betty, how do you have so much confidence? I really don't. I'm falling apart. But you have to just really kind of, and we need to just kind of let our children know that, hey, we're there. We don't have all of the answers, but as the last presenter talked about, being a support group. And I think one of the things she kind of alluded to, and time prevented her, we have to make sure that our children have some principles to live by, some philosophy, in addition to the fact that we must teach. I don't know what to do. In addition to, if you can teach respect or have children learn respect by example, because a lot of times we have very little respect for our children, and yet we want our children to have a great deal of respect for us, or we have very little respect for our colleagues, and we do things that create ill will, and then wonder why sometimes things don't go as smoothly as they should. We are still kind of caught up in bossism. Do what I say, I'm the boss kind of thing, rather than by example. And I think that probably more of us really need to examine this agency's charge of parenting skills. It's extremely important. Is it not the foundation? Do you not use these skills for the rest of your lives? Sometimes the lack of good parenting skills disrupt schools, disrupt churches, disrupt other kinds of institutions where other things should be going on. And we are still dealing with the parenting skills. So that this is really kind of fundamental. Now, how do we deal with it? If we find that there is dysfunctioning behavior, we cannot criticize the child or criticize the home, because what are we doing? We're still pulling them further apart. We thank her very much for her remarks. And the next presenter is Mr. Maxwell Manning, who is a certified social worker and project manager for Brooklyn Children and Family Services Network. Welcome him, please. A little better than that, because we're gonna give children support, are we not? Okay, if we're gonna give children support, and we're gonna give each other support, let's really welcome him like we love him.
Thank you. I always like to hear Dr. Tobias speak because she always stays very much in touch with the youth, and I feel that's a very important part of what we need to do as adults. We often criticize them. We look at the clothes they wear, the gold they wear, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they act, and we look at them and we a lot of times feel that they're stupid, that they're out of touch, that they don't know what's happening. But that sense of self that they are expressing, they got that sense of self from someplace. It didn't just come out of the air. And I would urge you to look within and look at ourselves, because we are the adults. We are the ones who are primarily in control of what happens in this society. And we are the ones who can take the leadership role. So I would urge you to do that. A perfect example of that is our professional sports colleagues. There's a large number of black male professional sports people. That's a large, gross national product, larger than a lot of the underdeveloped countries. A lot of that money is not going back into the black community. When I was going to college, there was a large cadre of black professionals that were being put out into the world as a result of some of the struggle of Afro-Americans during the 60s and 70s and before. That's a large resource of people that can help us to change this thing around. So we have the resources, we have the energy, we have the strength, we have all the things that we need to do to change this thing around. And it's a horrible thing that's happening out here. And one of the central core issues of this horrible thing that's happening out here is the drug problem. And that has really had an impact on the biological mother, father, and child. That has really impacted on how that family stays together. But why would a person do drugs? Why do people do drugs? People do drugs primarily because they have a low sense of self. Going back to my original statement about where people get their sense of self. They get it from the community, they get it from the family. Okay? So we have to really change some of that. And we've gotten so far off the track that some of us really do not even understand what having a sense of self is about. That's why some of our kids are walking around acting the way they act. Because they understand, even though they may be going in the wrong direction, they understand how important having a sense of self is. That's what they're searching for. They're looking for some answers. Some of us have stopped looking for some answers because we feel that we've found or we've given up or whatever. But I'm going to just put out a couple
some of the values that are passed down from Africa, passed down through the South, up to the North, are still here today. Many of us do not know enough about our history to even recognize them. And some of those values have to do with our cooperation with each other, our unity, our ability to share with each other, our spirituality. And we really need to get back in touch with that. And we also must urge the people, the funding people, to set up programs to help that be a part of what we teach in programs. And then we will have youth that will go out and spread those same values that have been passed on down through the years, will be passed and have passed on through the South, up to the North, into the northern families, and into our northern communities, and into the programs that help sustain the northern black communities. And that's only one aspect of really trying to help us develop a brighter future. Another most important aspect is development of the total self. And what I call the total self is the psychological self, the spiritual self, and the racial self. And the racial self, I think, is one of the most important keys. Because when you see youth growing up in a society where they do not feel proud about their race, they cannot really feel proud about too much else. They cannot really feel proud about themselves. Okay. One of the things that I remember at growing up and spending time around my grandmother, who was a housekeeper, worked 6 days a week, worked hard, was very active in the church, and raised 4 children of her own, but also raised a number of adopted children, and black and white, and had a kind of love that when you were around her, you just wanted to be around her, because that she expressed that kind of love. Today, a lot of children do not have that. They do not feel that adults want to be around them, so they don't want to be around adults. They want to establish their own thing. I'm going to do my own thing. Okay? The reason why I'm saying that is because this is all related. It all goes back to that biological family, and with the mother, the father, and the child. It all relates back to that. Okay? It relates back to the feeling that the biological child has in reference to her or his racial features. Okay? We all have to feel good about what our racial features are, because when we wake up in the morning, that's who we are. That's what we have to deal with. And we have to feel good about that. And there must be a mechanism that's supported in social service programs and advertising that supports good feelings about your racial features. Okay? The spiritual self. There must be a recognition that without the spiritual self, we all die. We have many people walking around without a strong spiritual self. You see it in the homeless. Their spirit is gone. Okay? We must develop programs that focus on continuing to enhance and develop that spiritual self. That good feeling that we have about ourselves, and the good feeling that we have when we address and deal with other human beings. Without that, the only way that we can interact with them is in a destructive manner. If we don't feel good about ourselves and we see another human being who looks like us, who we can identify with, how can we feel good about them? We can't. So what I am saying and what I am suggesting is that we start to develop programs that really address those issues, the issues primarily dealing with our culture, our racial attributes, and our psychological self. Psychological self, that's the last part I'm going to talk about. Very important piece. Because without us having some continuance of being able to feel psychologically whole, we feel just as fragmented as these services. may go to one place and feel good and another place and feel bad. And we may continue to go to the place where we feel bad because we have no other place to go to. Yet we have these different parts of ourselves that some feels good, some feels bad, some feels wishy-washy occasionally. And that we have to get to a point where we feel good most of the time. Because when we feel good spiritually most of the time, psychologically most of the time, racially most of the time, we send out that vibe to other people, we connect with those people, we develop ideas and strategies with those people, and then we can move things on. Okay? And the central core of that whole feeling of totality is the spiritual aspect. The spiritual aspect is the central core. Because the most important part of the spiritual aspect is the fact that we were created in the image of God. And if we recognize that within us, we can recognize it within each other. And we need to send out that message to each other. And we need to enhance that in each other. And we need to protect that aspect of each other. And through that, we will be able to move past where we're at right now. We'll be able to move past all the self-destruction that's going on. We'll be able to move past all of the negativity that's going on. And with that, no one can have a negative identity, whether it be racial, spiritual, or psychological. So I suggest that as a framework when you're thinking about developing programs and when you're thinking about this whole idea of developing programs for the biological parents and the child, that you think on those levels. Because I feel that that's really where the content is in terms of us being able to pull this thing around. One more thing, which has to do with the African-American father. The African-American father must be taught from the time that he is very young to be a father. Okay? If he is not taught from the time that he begins to walk and talk, then he will not know how to be a father when he does reach that age of having that responsibility. So if we do not teach young black male children from when they are really young that is an important part of their manhood, and that is an important part of who they are, then we cannot expect them to carry that role when they get older. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Manning. I just got a note from Randy, and it says, and I read, Daddy, since we are an hour late, see if you can get this first panel to end as close to 12, it's already 12, as possible so that panel number 2 can begin. Okay, then we are going to move, but you can see that what is being said is kind of important. He just mentioned some things that he felt that whatever you are doing, that the conceptual framework should include elements of culture, ethnicity, the psychological self, and the spiritual aspect. And one of the things is that he mentioned, and I will say this very briefly, is that it is not just the African American male who need to be taught fathering. Most of the men that I meet, regardless to ethnicity, need to be taught about fathering and husbanding and whatever. You know, one of the things is that it has, in a very inhuman way, been pointed out that the black male or the African American male is the only one that don't know anything about these things. And that is not true. And we go back to the institutionalization of racism. And I can remember when people were saying that, you know, love yourself and your features and your women and your children and the this and the that and the other. And and the other. And what they said was that that was hate. So that we have to understand that the whole society has grown up, has it not? That we understand now that the rudiments of that whole love yourself kind of thing, there's nothing racist about it. You might be proud of what God made you. And so that we need to, when youngsters talk about this and that and the other, and I've seen adults who say, you know, I don't want to hear anything about that junk. Don't come in here to me without that junk. But, you know, other things, so that respect for one's ethnicity is honorable. And one of the things is we live in a pluralistic society, and we have to have respect for others, do we not? And I think that, thank you very much, Mr. Manning, and our next speaker is Mr. Willie Wren, who is a certified social worker, executive director of Miracle Workers, and we certainly need to hear from him, do we not? Let's give him a round of applause as he gives us a super summary of all of that good material he's prepared for us. Another round of applause, please.
I got the message. Let me just give you some of the accomplishments of Miracle Makers. She said Miracle Workers, which means Miracle Makers. We did make a miracle in September of last year when the state given us a charge, along with the city, to develop 63 beds by the end of this end of last year calendar year, which is 12/88. We have developed so far 410 beds, with children is in the homes. But the charge we was to find 63 beds. We have returned back home to the natural parent 140 children since we've been in service last year in September. So presently enrollment now in our minority foster care services is 410 beds. Out of the 410 beds, 135 of them are kinship homes that we certify. Track record, in September of last year, they gave us a charge to look for those kinship homes and find them and certify them. We certified those homes, and we was able to get those people paid, due by the way, our SSC, monies that was paid to them for Christmas. Some of them got up to $16,000, $17,000 retroactive money in their hand, and now they are on our jurisdiction, which we will be paying them. We haven't been able to find extended families of many children we can't find in natural families, and being able to refer these children to grandmothers and grand aunts and all. Presently, Miracle Maker services 875 preschoolers for the past 17 years, 360 after schoolers. We was instrumental in bringing in 440 home attendants for the service seniors in their homes, and 65 homemakers, as well as we have an export service of senior citizens services, which we use PWP workers to go in and help our seniors, escort them to medical and all. The youth that we have serviced and teen pregnancies, domestic violence for battered women, and 35% of the battered women was cops' wives. But we could not ever get the cops to come in for counseling because they didn't have a problem. We're presently getting ready to start, and here in the near future, what we call a one-stop giant step program. And the one-stop giant step program will entail our giant step, which will be a half day. The mothers who's a welfare will bring their child there. At the same time, we will be giving them training while the child is being developed in the development program. So it would be innovative for them, instead of them bringing in children and dropping them off and go to the crack house and wherever they go, wherever a lot of it is going on, they will be mandated to do training. Presently, we have now involved ourselves in what we call the WEP program, which we have 87 welfare recipients that we are training throughout our services, which is in Bed-Stuy, Fort Greene, Bushwick, Brownsville, East New York, Browns Heights, all the way out in Bensonhurst. We have presently employed 460 child care workers. Also, we have brought 1,630 jobs into the community, and they are still there. We have brought $26 million in the community, and it's still there. So it's a track record for us. Involvement in the work experience program, it gives us a great leverage of training people in clericals, janitorials, our teachers' aides, and in our daycare center programs, many people that started as aides is now have gotten their masters and they are educational directors in our program. So we are saying that jobs is the answer. And many times I was in a workshop for all big bureaucracies talking at each other, and on Tuesday, and I said to myself, here are the people that are talking at each other for the little people, and I'm tired of it. And I've been for 3 years going to places they talking at each other, and I'm sick of it. Instead of talking to each other to resolve problems, to talk about welfare reform and all of this, people are saying to people, you should get a job making $4 an hour when you can get $4 an hour being on welfare. But it gives people a pride about themselves if they would do something. I'm a father of 4, plus I'm a foster parent of 2 young girls, which I didn't want to subject my wife to try to make another girl. I only had 1, so I took on 2 more to be sisters. And I tried to adopt these 2. These 2 children are grown now and doing very well. My 3 boys and girls are doing very well. My last one is in engineering now, graduating this year in June, electrical engineering. Doing quite well. I'm a retiree from New York City Transit Authority, as well as been sponsoring programs for the past 17 years. I come from a very small family in Birmingham, Alabama. My father was a coal miner, had a 3rd grade education. My mother had a 3rd grade education because they had to work somewhere in the county and then go to school 1:30 a day or whatever. But then my father moved to Birmingham and got a job in the coal mine. We have 15 brothers and sisters, which is all living, all married, all on their own homes, 9 professionals in the home. We had